Hey everybody, welcome back. Just finishing up the Cabin Fever Challenge season, so while I'm compiling scores, this will be the next video I'm releasing here. This is part 3 of the teacher evaluation series. And this one we're going to be looking at the actual evaluation that I got from my assistant superintendent, which detailed the lesson itself, which I'm sure is what a lot of people have been waiting for. This tends to be what most teachers focus on the most, and for good reason, because this is what most reflects what happens in your classroom during the lesson. I'm very proud of this one. I've got a lot of good feedback from the assistant superintendent, and I guess we'll just dive right into it. So, as you've all seen, most of the videos I've made on here, teaching-wise, are very focused on building a good classroom environment. So it's very nice to see that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. How does it taste? And well, this evaluation tells me that pudding tastes pretty good. This is a good way to see that I'm not just talking. If you do the things I'm telling you to the best of your ability, you will find your groove, and you'll figure out the best way to get your classroom in order the way you want it to be. So looking at this, okay, what we've got here, okay, this starts off focusing on domain 2, which is the classroom environment, right? Remember, this is using the Danielson rubric style, so that's where most of these are coming from. If something's checked off, it means that it was present and observed. If it's not checked off, then it means that it either wasn't present due to just the circumstances of the lesson, which is a pretty normal thing, or just the situation you were in. There was no way for them to actually observe that happening. So that's pretty common from my understanding. So creating an environment of respect and rapport. My interactions with the kids, okay, including words and my physical actions, are what was being observed here. So, we're saying here, I began the lesson welcoming students at the door. I try and stand at the doorway as much as I can when it comes to in between periods, because we don't really have very good hall monitoring in my school. So most of us try and stand in our doorways when we can. I find most of the time I can't, but when I do, I can. And I've always welcomed the kids into the classroom, whether I'm at the door or not, either just with a hi or a howdy or whatever I've got, whatever comes out that particular moment. And most of them are happy to see me, so that definitely helps. Okay. So when the kids come in, they've already got their routines down. Okay, it takes a little bit of time, but I don't ask them to do anything completely unique, and that helps a lot, because it helps them be consistent with their other classes. So when I do need to do some just verbal prompting, I always call a student by name. Okay. I didn't use this exact wording here. This is kind of a paraphrase. I'd be like, hey, Mason, need you to go to your desk, please. And that's about it. And that's all it takes, right? If you got a good rapport with a kid, that's already more than you normally have to do. So I did that. Okay, this was a kid who, in this case, was sitting on a desktop instead of sitting in the chair behind the desk. So, we did that. Right. Throughout the lesson, okay, I use a lot of questioning techniques. Leading questions are the bread and butter of teaching a new lesson. It prompts the kids to use their own minds, and that's what a lot of people are looking for, and it's a great way to teach just because it gets the mental juices flowing. So I support that, right? Questioning techniques, okay? A lot of times I'll ask them just to try and figure something out without giving them a whole lot of instruction on it, right? I'll show them a formula, maybe I'll do part of it, and then I'll say, towards the end somewhere, what else do I need to do? Take a look at what I've done so far, what's left. And that runs them right through. In this case, it was the formula for calculating board feet of lumber. So then, at the end of the lesson, okay, this is pretty standard format. Okay, if the kids did a good job, recognize it, right? Especially if you know that the lesson was kind of dry, like the one that I had to do. And that's why I tried to include stories and stuff when I teach, because on the dry content, it's definitely a little trouble keeping attention. So I thank them for that at the end, so that they know I understand it's not the most exciting thing without explicitly saying that it's not that exciting. So that's how I start off and basically run through a format for a lesson for my environment. It's all just about be real with the kids. Okay, that's really all you can do is just be real with them. All right. So learning culture. This one I got a lot of very good feedback on. I was honestly, it felt really good to be recognized for that, even though it in the big picture doesn't mean a whole lot. It was good to have a good classroom environment recognized by someone who is higher in the food chain than me. So, right, I've set a strong culture for learning. Okay, I emphasize that the content of learning is important without saying that grades are important. That's the big thing. Okay, don't focus on saying that this is important because you need a good grade. This is important because it's something that they're going to use in life, and it's something that's valid and relevant to their lives. That's the only way you're going to hook them in, right? I've also set my expectations for learning and achievement. Boom. Okay. I do set a lot of room to help the kids have pride in what they do. However, for this lesson, there wasn't a way for them to really show that to the evaluator, so that's why I could not get a check mark for that. All right. So looking back here at the evidence of it, okay, strong culture for learning, students raise their hands to speak and ask questions, okay, general routines. Okay, I will say this, even though I use hand raising in formal lessons like this, I generally don't explicitly tell kids to raise their hands. I don't know if anyone else has seen the same thing, but one of the little minor things that kind of gets my goat is when I'm sitting in a professional meeting, no kids around, no nothing, and people start raising their hands. These are people that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and have tons of power, yet they're in a meeting raising their hands like a 5th grader or an 8th grader. Instead of just using their social skills to interject at an appropriate time. So I use hand raising out of necessity, but when possible, I try not to regulate things that way and just break that conditioning a little bit. Just one of my little nitpicky things that my philosophy differs from a lot of people's. So I try not to ever give a student a flat no on something unless it's a request to go somewhere. Can I go to so-and-so's classroom to do this? And I'm like, no, you can go at the end, you got time. So in this case, if I am unsure of their answer, I'll say, hey, let's see, you might be right. That way it still has the validation, the kid still feels good about their answer. And I find sometimes when I'm in that situation, they are correct, and they usually are. So it helps them see that, I value what they say and what they're learning. Okay. I also explicitly tell them how I'm going to do things every day. Okay, every day when I come in, the kids know I'm going to take the first 2 to 3 minutes telling them exactly what's going on for the day and for the rest of the week. So, when they come in, I tell them exactly what I'm going to do. First, we're going to watch, and you're going to follow along with me. Then we're going to do some of it together. And then I'm going to set you loose to do some on your own. Okay? So this is, in some circles, they call this the I do, we do, you do. That's what I did for this, since it was a formal lesson with formulas. So that's very useful. However, it is a little time consuming. So if you're trying to speed up your lesson, sometimes it's good to not do so much of the we do. Maybe just do a little bit of it and then turn them loose. Okay. They noted that each student can and will be able to complete the task. Okay, that's a big one. Okay, that's your measure of success for students meeting your goals. All right, next one here is kind of cut off a little bit. Managing my classroom procedures. Okay, so managing instructional groups, that wasn't really something I had to do here because I didn't break kids into groups. This was a whole group lesson, and then I let kids work individually or pair up if they wanted to. So there wasn't a whole lot of management involved. Okay, what they did see was my management of transitions, so kids coming in and settling, following the routines, and then being released to do work independently. Okay, managing materials and supplies. Okay, you'll see that here down in the evidence. And performing non-instructional duties, that was something I really had no way to show here because there was no opportunity for me to do something that was non-instructional. Right? And that's actually a good sign, I think, because it shows that I didn't waste instructional time. All right. So for evidence on these, okay, I used the calculator to perform an operation. Okay, I know these kids aren't going to do the math in their heads, so I don't make them. Right? I let them use a calculator. Okay, and that also caters to their differentiated needs because there are some kids that need to have a calculator. Okay, the calculator was with me, as was my ruler to show measurements. Okay, that is part of managing materials and supplies. I had everything ready to go. I didn't have to search for anything. Okay, right? Materials and supplies were at hand. That's part of the same deal there. Okay. What she was pretty impressed by was that a student in the back needed something in his locker and went back to retrieve it without doing anything disruptive or anything like that. He just quietly got up, grabbed it, and came back to his seat. So I got a little pat on the back for that because it totally was unnoticeable to most of the kids, and it's part of that routine. Okay. So we did that. A side note, the lockers I'm talking about are in-classroom lockers, not their main lockers. So that was something I got a little pat on the back for. Okay, and that showed as evidence that my expectations have been set and the students know that they can do this stuff independently. They don't have to raise a hand and disrupt the lesson in order to do it. And that's a big thing, right? Kids know when they need to ask permission and when they don't need to ask permission. So that's that one. Okay, managing behaviors. Okay, so for this one here, there was clear evidence of my expectations. Okay, there was no opportunity for me to show that I was monitoring student behavior just because there was no misbehavior. Okay, and I didn't have an opportunity to show a response to misbehavior because there was no misbehavior. Right? If you've got your expectations set, these two don't really happen unless you're in an open environment. Maybe the kids are working on machines or something during a lesson. That would be an opportunity for monitoring. And if you're doing things right, you don't really have to show a response because there won't be anything to respond to. So what they said here, right? Expectations were established. Students raise their hands when they have a question. They sit in their desks during instruction, and they followed the process for heads down, thumbs up. Okay. I mentioned in the last video on this, I don't really do heads down, thumbs up very often, but it is a good tool when you need it. Okay. Organizing the space. Okay, I focus on safety and accessibility. All right. That was something that was shown. Okay. And arranging furniture and physical resources, there wasn't really an opportunity to show that, just because of the fact that we were at our desks doing a standard lesson, right? So evidence here, the class is a woodworking classroom. Okay, this is really just a standard middle school, junior high, introductory tech classroom. I've got scroll saws and basic equipment, nothing out of the ordinary. My room's kind of divided into half workshop, half classroom. Okay, they were seated at the desks. Okay. The way that the desks were arranged was easy to move and were safe, right? There was nothing to trip over or anything like that. Okay, domain 3 is the instruction itself. So I set my expectations for what they were learning, and I explained why the content was there. I put it into context. Okay, and then I used oral and written language. Okay. So I had it posted in the classroom. We use I can statements in my district. Frankly, I'm not a huge fan of that sort of thing where you have to post them, but it is a school policy, so I do it. So my I can statement, which would also be known as like a students will be able to sort of deal, that is something where I learned it in college as students will be able to, and then a statement. It's the same thing as I can. You're just changing the semantics. So in this case, when the lesson is done, students will be able to apply knowledge to design and construct a project, right? This was part of a woodworking project that they would design themselves, which admittedly is a little advanced when it comes to 7th grade, but most of them managed to do it. So I was really proud of that. As part of my storytelling, okay, I used an example from Shark Tank, okay, so that they have some sort of real life example. So I asked, what does it cost to make what you're building? If I wanted to make a profit, how much do I have to sell it for? Right, I was looking for a profit margin. Okay, and the bill of materials gives you the cost. Right, that's the first step of it. Okay, I also then went into a trip to Lowe's. Okay, I need to know the amount of board footage. That's why that's relevant. Okay, and I stressed the importance of the vocabulary by continuing to use the correct terminology. Okay, even if you don't specifically do a vocab assignment, use the terminology, get kids into the habit of using it, and the rest follows. Okay, I don't generally give vocabulary assignments. I just use the vocabulary. The kids pick up on it, and that's that. Right? Okay, questioning and discussion techniques. Okay, quality of questions and prompts, student participation. These were both good. Okay, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion to do on this one because it was more of a how-to kind of deal. So I used leading questions to ask kids to recall knowledge. Okay, led them to the connections I wanted them to make. Okay, so we're basically probing with questions. So they're learning by learning how to make questions that will get them the answers they're seeking. Okay, it's the basis of all knowledge, is learning how to ask not just questions, but the right questions. Okay, delving more into it. Okay, so I talked about board footage, and board footage is a measurement of volume. Okay, I also tried to figure out, who remembered what type of wood we were using. In this case, it was pine. Okay, they raised hands. Okay, I called on a student without a hand raised. To check for understanding and elicit some extra answers. They liked that because that way that showed that I was paying attention, that a student looked like they were a little lost, and helped them out. So we got that. Okay, that's also a way that I can refocus a student a little bit. The thing is, if you're going to call on a student whose hand isn't raised, you need to make sure that you're not going to humiliate them. Okay, maybe make them slightly uncomfortable, but don't do it in a context that's going to make that student feel attacked or violated or dumb or anything like that. Calling on a student shouldn't be used as a punishment. It should only be used to refocus. So if you're going to ask that kid a question, make sure you ask something that they can answer, even if they haven't 100% been paying attention. Okay. All right. That brings us into engagement. Okay, activities and assignments, they were all engaged. Okay, there was no grouping because it was individual work. Okay, didn't have to do anything with the materials or structure and pacing. Okay, evidence of this was just the project itself. Okay, okay, then using the assessment in instruction. Okay, I monitored their learning, and I allowed the kids to assess themselves. Okay, I gave feedback as needed, but in this case, none of the kids really had any questions because they understood it. So I didn't get a check there. And assessment criteria, there wasn't really an opportunity to have that explicitly shown. I don't generally do that. The kids know inherently that I'm just looking for effort and self-growth. So those two I couldn't get a check mark for, but they are there. Okay, so monitoring learning, I used the heads down, thumbs up. Okay, and by checking the kids' work as they were working, I was able to just monitor progress. All right, and then the end here, flexibility and responsiveness. Okay, I was persistent. Okay, and I responded to the kids when they had questions. Okay, if something wasn't working, I kept at it until they understood it. That's really what this comes down to. Okay, I had one student that was having a little more trouble. This particular kid had an IEP and a couple other things, and he was struggling, so he requested to come to Learning Block, which is kind of like a during the day extra help. We don't have after school. We have a like 30-minute period halfway through our school day where we can request kids to come in so that we can give them extra help. Right? So he asked me for the extra help. I said, sure, come on in, wrote him a pass, and he was good. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so that's what actually happened in the classroom. The next one will be about the feedback I got after the fact. Thanks for tuning in.